Hello there everybody and welcome back to episode 5 of my tutorial series for Songs of SYX version 66. So, today we are going to go into refining and farming, because in the previous episodes we have successfully set ourselves up a wonderful little empire. We have science, we have a stable food income, we have a stable wood income, we have furniture production, we pretty much have everything that we might desire for this run. So let's quickly put the furniture, the pottery out of the market. And where do we start? Simply with grain, because grain is the power crop, especially for the humans. Grain in itself is useless. You can't eat it, you can't use it except for trading, but grain can be refined into bread and booze. Therefore, it is a real powerful companion. Brain. Grain transforms directly one-to-one into bread, which makes it also a very, very efficient thing, because a grain farm produces much more grain than, for example, fruit or a vegetable farm on the same space. It's a very room-efficient crop. So we're going to get started with the grain farm, not the brain farm. That's not happening. Not on my watch. So when we are building the farm, we get instantaneously that fertility overlay. We want to build where it's as cyan as possible or as blue as possible. As you see here, this map is full of fertile soil. So we're going to go, well, right on to this spot here. I like it. So when I personally build farms, I don't do no half measures. The thing with farms is I personally think the best way to put them down is to go for a high spread like that. Here I'm cutting now a little bit down until I am expanding again, until I have roughly those 21 farmers. There we go. So, produces then roughly 90 pieces of grain a day. Here we go. So that's how I want to have it. 85 pieces of grain. To kickstart the process, we do need grain though. And we also do need 21 people that we can afterwards bind on that farm. If you have not the amount of workforce available for that purpose, it is totally okay to build a smaller farm. I personally think the very first farm is fine if it is only housing 10 workers. You can then either decide for yourself if you want to expand it or build a new one. It's up to you. The thing is just that it is very a farm that you can't maintain worker-wise is not worth anything. Therefore, the first farm could start out smaller than that, but the later ones ideally build them like I've shown you in the first place, because you just get the most bang for your buck this way. So we will now require a little bit of grain that we will just forage. So we have here in this menu the foraging system, and we can forage grain from the ground. So we're going to go for these spots, and you can basically forage everything that is growing around you, just as a side note. But we're going to be okay with that. So if you want to kickstart the process differently, you can also start trading with your neighbors. We could easily ask our friendly neighbors here if they don't happen to have 200 pieces of grain for us. Grain happens also to be dirt cheap. As you see there, it is really a small time investment. Let's see how fast we are going to get together with this. Don't know. I want to try how good my foragers do their job or not. We'll see about that. As long as my city is stable in the food production and consumption rate, you don't need to worry about the passage of time too much. The worst that can happen is that somebody will die off of old age or a crime or anything like that, and all those things just end up in the graveyard, so that's not a big deal. Alright, let's go into super fast mode and see how things go down. So as you see here, we're slowly building up our science pool. until it stays at a certain point. Now we have obviously reached peak science, and yeah, that's just that. Here we also now see that the grain is being transported to the farm. We have obviously foraged enough to get the ball rolling. I will now disable the jobs for grain foraging because I'm not a big fan of driving my people that far away from home. They should be busy elsewhere, and the more jobs I place everywhere on the map, the more scattered the whole business will be in my city, and that's always something to ponder about and keep an eye out for. So we are going to go for yet another warehouse. I'm picking up and copying these small time warehouses quite a lot because I find them quite comfy. You can also go for one large warehouse just to your own liking. But since version 66 has lessened the radius of the warehouses quite substantially, I feel like, yeah, spreading smaller ones all over the grid seems to be, for me personally, the better choice now, compared to these huge warehouses that I've been building in previous versions. So, game's been changing, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. So the new warehouse will be obviously for the grain, but we will not end there. So here we go. Ah, well, turns out we do still have a little bit of technology to be produced. So let's see, we have 840 in total, and when we check back here, there will be still some production for a while. Still would be most happy if we could be seeing how far our tech pool would go over here already, but well, it is already a lot better than it was before. Also, I wanted to mention that when you hover a certain material, you can also see where the how the consumptions and the productions work towards each other. I'm so happy that this is finally exactly how I wanted it to be. I was wishing for this since a couple of versions, and I'm super happy that it's there. It's exactly what I was wishing for. So we see here that our wood is more than enough to get the job done. Currently, work orders are going down quite slowly because we ran out of odd jobbers, so let's hire a few people. And as you see here, we are now out of workers entirely because the farm kicked in working. So we're going to fix that easily by just unemploying some of these woodcutters. We are still over providing wood quite nicely, so there's still workers left for the warehouse. But this is the reason why I delay farming as a later stage project. It just binds workers tremendously long, and yeah, you just need to have that kind of workforce available to get the best out of these farms. Previously, I would have been not able to build up all these new services or the research, all the things that I'd require would have suffered for the sake of farming. And I've had several cities deadlocking themselves by just binding too much workforce to the farms, just as a side note. So, the farm does produce a huge amount of crop all at once. So we will this year not harvest too much because it's always the first year is a crappy year. But after that, we will have a lot of crops to care about. So I just take a peek at my janitor's workplace. Highly recommend you to do that every now and then to make sure that your city is not dilapidating. So we are fine here on that end. And now let's configure this warehouse. So this one will be a special one. First off, we'll upgrade it. Warehouses can be upgraded without any tech to upgrade their capacity. This will not upgrade the total capacity of crates, it'll upgrade the quality per crate. So now we can store 320 of a good in each crate instead of just 80. This will make this warehouse much more efficient and ready to store those humongous amounts of grain. We will also set up the storage for bread. over here as well. So that's been dealt with. So next step, we need that bakery. The bakery is also a pretty labor intense place where you will bind a lot of workers into one spot. So you will need some workforce for that. The good point about it is it creates tons of food and food that the humans love. By the way, bread is all over the board a very, very popular food. So this is also the point where we have to think about where our agriculture will be at and where our crafting will be at. This city is blessed with fertile soil everywhere, so we don't have to ponder about this question too much. Basically, we can set up the bakery right next to the grain fields without any problem. Most cities, though, or many cities, will have patches of fertile soil where you can do farming very well, and patches of very, very low fertile soil where you can do the baking very well. So in our scenario, that's pretty much not the case at all, so I consider myself a happy, lucky man. We are going to set up the bakery, nevertheless, a little bit down the road here, because it is a noisy place, and we still want to keep the noise away from our housing. That kind of a distance is more than enough, and we are going to set up here a medium-sized build. This is large enough. You can easily make it smaller if this is too large for your taste. I personally like to have workshops that just have a lot of capacity and offer me the option to just put more workers in at a later stage when my capacities are higher and all. But you can perfectly build small bakeries that don't have such a huge building around them. It's up to you. I see both methods very, very feasible and having their charm on their own. Anyways, we now have to set up auxiliary ovens again to crank up the efficiency. I think this is a mechanic that you should be by now so familiar with that I don't think it's worth mentioning anymore, but I still want to do it every now and then. Down goes the storage. For the bakery, place down a generous storage, as the bakery is bulky. You have to store huge amounts of stuff in there, and if you don't place down enough crates into the storage element, your workload can even suffer off of that. Because the problem is, very simply said, if there is not enough stored inside the production facility, your people will work badly, and the people in your facility can only work with what's inside this box, and you cannot build more of these. You see, there's only one central storage per workshop allowed. I guess that's a coding thing. Now, this is what we're going to work with, and we fire it off. This hosts 30 bakers one day. It's a lot of people right now, but as a matter of fact, it's not. We just are working on small numbers as of yet. So, to crank up our happiness a little bit again, because obviously we do need more workers, we're going to work now a little bit of magic. So first off, we are going to improve the housing. As you can see here, we have 0% fulfillment on the furniture tab. This is not necessary. We can furnish our homes with all manner of different things, but we're going to start out with wood. Every pip of that is, I think, an assignment of... well, sadly you don't get a percentile amount of that, but every pip allows the people to pick up a certain amount of this stuff to furnish their homes with. I mean, you just have to count the pips and divide it through the number that you see here, and then you know how many units of wood every pip is worth. This user interface has its weaknesses here and there, but it's overall very solid. I don't want to badmouth it at all. So, in short, we are going to allow our folks now to fulfill 50% of that order. That will be roughly 300 units of wood that will be taken off of our stockpiles. This is literally nothing for us, as we are producing wood all the way, and it increases the happiness of our people towards their homes, which is really important and will go a long way. At this point of our production, I think it is even safe to go for the full fulfillment, and it'll also end up in new homes. Check this out. They also look different now because they have access to timber. Isn't it nice? They're not living in straw shacks anymore. So that'll go directly into the happiness of all the people, but it will increase the cost of housing, because not only do you need to put that stuff now into every new home that is going to be built. This is now basically we upgraded the cost per house, and retroactively we'll have to pay these dues now. Not only that, but we also now have an upkeep on our housing. As you see there, there is a consumption rate behind that, and 0.25 per item per year, which means 25% of that total number will be consumed per year, just for the sake of sustaining our housing. Sadly, this is not being displayed here. Would be really cool if so, but it just means that we have to employ 1 or 2 woodcutters more at the end of the day. But we already have 3 new aspiring immigrants out of that, and this shows that this whole new scheme pays off easily for itself. We're going to employ 2 new woodcutters at this end to make sure that the bills can be paid, but I think I'm overdoing it already. The other trick that we can use now is check out the rest of the tabs if you find something that you can fulfill easily. Here I'm going to give you a little bit of a trick away. The benches. Every culture loves benches. Seriously, there is no race out there that doesn't love benches. Even those things love to sit on a bench. I mean, they don't look like, but even the Garthimi loves to sit on a bench. Now, benches can be built in the Decorations tab here at Construct. The construction of a bench costs you only a little bit of furniture. It also has a little bit of an arrow that shows you where it's pointed at. Can you see it? I hope you can see it on the video. So I hate that it's so obscure. Anyways, so we put these in front of the houses, or, well, you can put them down wherever you want to. But in short, these will just pump up the happiness of your people. You can put them down wherever you want to, but don't splat them down all on one spot. Again, it is all about whenever one of your people feels like sitting down, they will look for a bank, or a bench. Sorry, as Germans would call that a bank. You will look for a bench. And if they only find taken benches, they will be like, nah, there's no bench here. So spreading them out does deter that problem. So here we're chucking out a few here and there, and these will then be set up and will cost you a little bit of furniture over the course of the time. That's all. But they will attract a few people. And there is obviously a limit to this. Once this bar is full, you can't attract more people by offering them benches. But since the construction of benches only binds a little bit of work on your janitor, this is a very, very low-cost measure to get these extra workers in your city that you require so desperately. Because you will notice this phase of the game is a constant fight for enough workers. And if you go for the wrong projects, you will eventually end up with no way of increasing the happiness for your city anymore without investing workers into it anymore. If this happens to you, just shut down any of the unnecessary industries for a while. Check out if you're overproducing food. If you're heavily overproducing food, you can easily free up a few workers there. Check out, are you binding too many people on your carpentry or woodworking? Either way, if you invest people into getting more people, at the end of the day, usually you end up net positive. But always take care of the fact that oversaturating these things ends up with nothing. And always check out if the project in question can be upgraded. So for example, here the stages look like they are There are not enough stages, so it looks like at least, but as a matter of fact, it can't rise higher than 50% because we need to upgrade them to reach the full yield there. Therefore, it's all fine and dandy. They have all the stages they want. Surely, a few people mutter about not enough stages, but those are really not enough to warrant more wells, more stages. And the same goes for the wells. They have even 2 upgrade levels, so the city is totally happy with wells. It would be really nice if it wouldn't be that obscure to read it out, but now you know it, so you don't need to worry about that. So whenever you see a service being underprovided, always check out how many upgrade levels it has and how much impact on the quality the upgrade level will have. Quite often you will notice that bringing up new services won't do anything except for binding workers without any meaning. So for example, if I'd be copying that lavatory, I'd be just binding another worker for a nod. It wouldn't bring anything. So just a couple of side thoughts here while we were waiting for the bakery to be completed. As you see there, we have now an upgrade on the lighting, on the bench side, and yeah, you can choose for you, or you can look around for yourself where you can find things. I mean, you just need to hover over the things to check out how they work. But I'm of course going to explain more of these little tricks alongside of the series. So I am now again on negative housing, bothersome, but well, it is what it is. It is also sort of a good sign to run out of housing every now and then, because it means that you are growing so fast that you need more houses. It's a good development. So I'm setting up a few more long houses here. And as you can see, there's a constant pull of people. And that's a really piece of good news. All right. So the grain farm is going to yield its first harvest in 5 days. That'll take a while, but our bakery ain't finished yet either. So let's go into fast mode here again. Let's check it out. Yep, consumption versus production goes slowly negative. I mean, there is still potential on the pasture. We still haven't filled it entirely up, but yeah. The bakery and the grain will be very much needed. All right. Pun intended. So we got up to 30 people working here, and we're obviously not going to let anybody work here for now because it's nonsense. We don't have any grain to process, so we don't need any workers. There is another thing that I'm going to do though here. So remember the hauler? He's become obsolete by now. So we're going to delete that room, but we're going to set up a new hauler right next to the bakery. As it happened to me quite often, fuel for the bakery is something that sometimes is not delivered on time. A bakery without fuel can't produce, and that is sometimes really a problem. So we are employing here somebody to alleviate that issue. Haulers are really cool as they have a relatively high reach, and if you chain up several of them, you can even transport goods over a pretty long stretch without breaking too much of a or without having to invest too heavily into resources. That's what I'm trying to say here. So we are going to go for 5 more workers, and let's clear some more rocks. I just discovered that my rock stockpiles are not sufficiently full anymore. Rocks don't have a real spoilage rate. I mean, that doesn't come as a big surprise, I think. So you can safely store as many rocks as you want. It's worth checking out how every material behaves. They are all wildly different, but most minerals and such spoil extremely slow, while organic materials spoil relatively fast. Meat and foodstuffs often have a really heavy spoilage rate, but luckily stored stuff if I read that correctly, spoils slower. This is a real upgrade towards all the previous versions. This has, I can't remember that this has ever been a thing. So to me, it's a new thing for version 66. Correct me where I stand wrong. We're also going to delete the tree chopping job now because we are totally fine on that end. We don't need anything extra. We are now waiting for the first grain harvest. It'll take a while for your city to balance out the production of grain per year. So at first you will struggle with the numbers. We are now determining that we have 33 pieces of grain per day. So let's work with that. One baker, let's see. We wait for the first baker to arrive at his new job, and we see that one baker consumes about 6 pieces of grain a day. So we're going to set up like 5 bakers for now. Let's make it 6 because it doesn't hurt us if the grain stockpile gets depleted. And just like that, we are cranking out 36 breads per day. Checking out our previous consumption rate, this is a massive bump up. And that's the power of grain. While we don't even spend much room, I mean, compare the room spent to the pasture versus the farm. The pasture produces a meager 16 pieces of meat per day, whereas this thing cranks out the grain needed for 36 pieces of food per day. That's the difference in efficiency. But the big difference is also worker density. The grain farm and the bakery have both an insanely high worker density compared to the pasture. The pasture spreads out at 15 workers over a really huge room and just requires not that much. Here we can cramp in 30 people. Here we bind 10 people, so a grand total of 40 people are just working on this eventually. That's quite a lot. And we will need more grain farmers to fully get this bakery here into swing, but I'm getting ahead of myself. For now, we are just where we want to be, and the best part about this is the bread produced here is a preferred food of the humans. So this whole area here goes nuts again because we are fulfilling the food preference meters. All of a sudden, the humans have some meat to put their, have some bread to put their meat on, and you know what that means? It's burger time in our city, and everybody loves that. I mean, it's maybe also sandwich time or whatever, but humans obviously are very, very carnivorous here. Anyways, I'll leave today's episode with that, and I think this was a pretty nice introduction into the whole farming business. So the last minute I just want to fill with the following information. All of the farms behave pretty much like the grain farming. It's just sufficient to say that none of the other farms come out with that much grain per farm. As you see here, fruit has only a production of 2. Mushroom 1.25, vegetable 2. The orchard is with 3 a real high competitor, but the grain, which we can directly convert one-on-one into bread, is just the highest yield crop, and that's that. Cotton also comes out with a pretty high yield, but it is not edible, therefore it doesn't really count. So, last thing, orchards versus farms. Orchards require several years of growth, and then they are really productive and crank out a lot of fruit. Before that, they are just binding a crap ton of workers, and you don't get anything in return until then. So the bottom line about these is you should really try to delay that until it's time for orchards and until you have sufficient amounts of workers, because again, they are very efficient once you have the workers. But until then, I think it is better to invest your workforce elsewhere. Now, more about all that in the next episode, because next episode we're going to start working other industries. I feel like starting to produce clothing for our city, because that is another big milestone down the road now that we have a enormous amount of food at our hand. We can easily grow even further. See you all in the next episode. Drop me your comments, leave me a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and check out the description box. You will find the playlist link down there, and among these also my Discord, my Twitch. And if you'd be willing to support Icon Gaming, well, there are links to PayPal, Buy Me a Coffee, or Patreon, or the channel membership system of YouTube is also available. Whatever tickles your fancy, I'd be so happy if you'd be willing to. But I also want to say thanks to everybody watching these videos. That really, really means a terrible lot to me. So, see you all on the next one. Bye-bye.